Thank you for joining the Chair Chronicles podcast. I'm Carla D. Tillery, your life coach and your favorite auntie. This episode is part of a 4-part series on Have You Had the Talk? The talk is a common expression in the Black community, but usually it's focused around having those conversations with your children about racism. But we need to have more of the talk. So, this series deals with having the talk with our families about unexpected and expected deaths of a loved one, having the talk with our children about racism, having the talk with our family and friends about the psychological impacts of living while Black, and also having the talk about the economic pitfalls that face the Black community. Welcome to the Chair Chronicles podcast. I'm excited because I have some special guests. LA and I are excited to host another part of the talk series. And today's podcast is about, have you had the talk about the racial pandemic? Who are you talking to and what are you talking about? Because it is such an important and necessary conversation. As a result, there's so many things we've seen now on the news, on media, on social media accounts. Everybody is talking now about what is happening with the race wars, for lack of better words. There's so much tension that's going on in America, and we need to have that important conversation. So thank you for joining us. We have Mr. Kevin Hunt here, who I'm so excited to be here with us. And we also have Mr. Dimple Lawrence, and they're going to just share some of their experiences and join me in LA as we talk about this important conversation. So hello, everybody.
Hello. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Welcome to our virtual studio.
Yes.
All right, so let's kick it off. And I really would love to hear about what your racial encounters have been. And when did you realize you were Black? Did your mom tell you? Did did someone was like, oh, you are Black? Like, when did you realize that you were really in the minority? And did someone point it out to you? So I'll start with you, Mr. Kevin. When did you find out you were Black?
Wow. Probably when I was about 7 or 8. I went to a camp, ironically called Camp Whiteman. And it was in Norwich, Connecticut. And my mother sent me there just to kind of get me out of the neighborhood for a week. It was a 2-week camp. And it was a Christian-based camp. And I get to this camp, and I am the only Black person there. And so, as most kids do, we start teasing each other. This kid's short, this one's too skinny, this one's fat. And that went on for a while. And then one kid came out and said, you're the only Black kid here. And I was like, well, dang. And I didn't have a comeback for that. But interestingly enough, my experiences at a very early age was one of superiority over white folks. I didn't have the inferior complex that is so entrenched and so brainwashed that we had. I actually felt sorry for white folks. We used to play ball with them, and they always seemed weaker, not as good, they couldn't dance. You can see certain favoritism to them. So I actually felt sorry for them, and losing any type of contest, whether it was an academic contest or a scholastic contest, it was almost equal to being, if you will, beat by a girl back then. So I've always felt this certain sense of superiority over white folks and feeling actually sorry for them. So it's a little different.
Yes.
But that's my first encounter.
That's your first encounter.
That was my first encounter, yeah.
All right, Dimple, when did you realize you were Black? What's your first experience about recognizing that you might be different or in the minority or maybe the superiority?
I can actually echo some of the same sentiments as Kevin, because of the fact that, when it came to sports, growing up, my neighborhood was pretty split. My school was pretty split. I'd like to say when I looked across the locker room in high school, there was 5 white kids, 5 black kids, and 5 Hispanic kids. And that's pretty much the way that the populace kind of equated to my neighborhood. But when I first encountered or first realized that I was Black, wasn't until I was actually like 19 and really like aware of like what was going on around me. I had gotten my first car. I worked really hard for it. I was just really proud to drive around my 1997 Honda Civic. And I was 19 years old, and I would go to work in the morning from 7 to 3. And after that, I would take off and go play basketball for the rest of the afternoon and evening. I picked up my friend. We were driving to Middletown to go try to find a place to hoop. And to no avail, we couldn't find a place. So we're headed back to Meriden. On our way back, we got pulled over. I didn't realize at the time that colors mattered. So I'm not talking about the color of my skin. I'm actually talking about color affiliations. I had waves were big. So I had my do-rag on. I had my hair brushed to make sure that, if I was sweating, my do-rag was going to get soaked up with the headband. And I was pulled over, and the cop, the first thing he asked was to get out of the car. My friend and I were both 19 years old. We got out of the car. He said, "What are you guys doing in Middletown? Are you guys a part of a gang? Are you guys Bloods?" And that's when I realized, like, yeah, I had a red cutoff shirt. It was like a summer league basketball shirt. And I had red sneakers on, red and white Jordans, and I had a black and red two-tone do-rag on. And that's when I realized, like, wow, like, am I being pulled over because I'm Black and because I have red on? And that was like sort of disheartening to me because of the fact that that wasn't my experience growing up. My experience of police officers growing up were police officers that sort of looked like me, whether Black or Hispanic. And even the white police officers would stop by. I remember when I was like 7 or 8 years old, and they kind of stopped by with Lion King toys when Lion King was big around Christmas. So in retrospect, this experience was just like shocking to me. I now realize, like, wow, I didn't blow by a stop sign. I didn't run a red light. I'm being pulled over because I'm driving through a neighborhood in Middletown and I'm Black and I have red on. So it took about 10, 15 minutes for the cop to search our car. I had my hands on the hood. Across the street was a former girlfriend's aunt. She actually reached out to me on Facebook a little while, probably like an hour or two after that. She actually said to me that she was so proud of the way that I stayed composed while they searched my car and they found nothing. It was like maybe another 15 minutes after that, and I was let go. But that was the first time that I actually felt like rattled, like maybe I'm doing something wrong, even though I know I didn't do anything wrong.
Gotcha.
Wow.
Yeah, that's probably, unfortunately, a common experience, being pulled over, perhaps because you fit some type of profile.
Yeah.
So yeah. So Latricia, and it's going to be interesting to see if there's any differences between the male and the female experience. Latricia, when did you realize you were Black? Is it something similar or something totally different?
Well, actually, it's similar. I grew up in a multicultural neighborhood, Italians, Indian, Spanish, white. So my experiences growing up as a child, we all played together. We really didn't do the your skin is dark and my skin is light. We didn't do any of those kind of games or anything like that. I didn't have my first experience of someone really being surprised and shocked that I was Black was when I graduated from college, and my first job, I'm dating myself now, but it was the Chapel Square Mall when there were businesses in the tower. I worked for a law firm, and one of our clients was from South Africa. And so I spoke to him a lot on the phone. He came into the office. I walked in and introduced myself, and his words were, "Oh, wow, I didn't know you were Black."
Wow.
Yeah.
And so at that time, being right out of college and, very sure of myself, my retort back was, I leaned back and said, "Oh, I didn't know you were white," and I didn't get it. I didn't understand. And I'm one that questions things. And I said, "Well, why why did you ask? I said, why are you shocked? And he was honest. He said, first of all, your name doesn't sound ethnic and you don't sound Black. Yeah. And we ended up in a discussion. I said, well, what is Black supposed to sound like? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I walked back to my desk and I was surprised that I wasn't angry about it. I was just like, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? I don't sound Black. You're shocked that I'm Black. Like, what is that? So I think it was more so me thinking, okay, this guy truly doesn't get it. I mean, I could have felt the same way. You're from South Africa. When we think of Africa, who do we think about? People of color, So, right. Yeah, that was like the only experience that I had that really kind of took me back. And I was like, right. I don't know how I should feel about that,
So it's interesting because Latricia, you and Dimple had experiences closer to your late teens. And it sounds like, Kevin, yours was a lot younger, and so was mine. Mine was much younger. I remember I was 8 years old, and I lived at that time in an all-Black neighborhood. I went to a school that was diverse, but at that time, there were only a few school buses. And so what I recognized was there was a first bell and a second bell. And I was always on the second bell when they discharged, because they took the white kids home first. And then they would come back to the school and pick up the Black kids and take us to our homes. And so that's when I started to recognize that I didn't look like them, nor did I live where they lived. And I was always last. The Black kids were always last. We were the last ones to go eat. We were the last ones to get to the school. And we were the last ones to leave the school, because the white neighborhoods had the resources first, and then they will come get us. So I was 8 years old when I started to recognize that there certainly was a distinction between the white kids and me.
Well, I think looking back for me, and it was an early age, is that I was always, it seems as I look back, prepared for it. LA talks about dating herself. I'm getting ready to really date myself. But I was a 15-minute member of the Black Panther Party in New Haven. And the Black Panther headquarters was actually right down the street in Dixon Avenue from my house. And we used to go down there as kids. And they had like a basketball court back there. So we used to play ball. So you couldn't help but hear their rhetoric, and you couldn't help but hear the down with the pigs. And I'm talking about being like 11, 12, 13 years old. So there was a point in time that I know that I was prepared for it. And I was only a member for 15 minutes, because when I came home with the Black Panther garb on, I mean, I had the beret, and I had the cut off denim jacket, and I had the afro. And I remember walking up the driveway, and I saw my mother in the kitchen, and I think I said something like right on and power to the people. And she literally beat that crap off me, because back then the Black Panther Party were targets by the police.
Oh yeah.
So the targeting by the police is, as we all know here, is not anything new. The newness of it is that the technology has made it more out there. So, but yeah, my experience, and I was always prepared for it. It was like, here's the set of rules. And the fact that they're unfair means absolutely nothing. You have to, it's kind of like if it's raining, you put on a raincoat. If it's cold, you put on a winter coat. If there's white folks on there, you got to cloak yourself in anti-racism garb. So, I was prepared for it. And it was so abstract back then. It wasn't as in your face now. It was something like more of not listening to the music that you liked on the radio. You didn't see us on television.
Right.
But the first instance was when I was at this program at Yale as a kid, and I went to the bookstore, which is now Barnes and Noble. And I went to the Yale bookstore to get my books, and told to leave the store. And I said, gee, are you closing? And the guy, it was like me and three of my friends. And he was like, no, we're not closing, but you guys are probably going to steal, and I don't have time to follow you around, so you're gonna have to leave.
Wow.
So I went home and told my mother that she said, did you get your books? And I said, no. And she goes, why? And I said, because we left the store. My mother was like, she was kind of like Malcolm X and Bobby Seale rolled into one. She didn't, and so she went down to the store and made a scene. And I loved it because and Carla knows me, I don't ever shy away from confrontation. And I probably get it from my mother, but I absolutely loved it.
Absolutely.
But she conducted herself in such a ladylike way. I mean, there was no profanity, there was no loud talking, but she was not to be denied. I got my books, got them for free. And
yay for your mom.
Yeah, that's how you handle stuff, you know.
Right.
I mean, yeah, it's unfair, but you don't cower away from it. There are things you have to do to overcome it. And
So you were talking earlier, Kevin, about a little bit about, you know, the only difference now and what we're experiencing is that some of the incidences are more accessible, whether it's through people's using their phones to record and posting on social media. Is there anything else from anybody in terms of explaining why does it feel? It feels a little different to me. It certainly feels like there's this huge awakening to other people that this exists. And my response has been, you know, it always exists. I've got hundreds of stories to tell about different incidences where people made me realize that I was Black by the way they treated me, because they didn't treat me like I knew I should have been treated. And I know that they were not treating me like other white counterparts. And so I've always known this exists because I've always been Black, but it does feel like something is different now. What do you guys think? Is it different? Is it the same?
I think that in my experience, I feel like in the last 3 to 4 years, it's been more prevalent to me. And I'm not sure if it's more of a psychological, social climate wokeness, or if it's something that is just more overt in my experience of like becoming more of an adult, right? So I would say that my experience in college was pretty much the same as my experience in high school, even though I saw more white people around me than people of color, people that look like me. But I think that for me, school was a focused arena where I went to school. I was an RA, so I did that. And I was, again, in more of a, like what Kevin referred to, in more of a superior role. And in fact, like the people that reported to me or the people that, I was responsible for actually didn't look like me. So it wasn't until I actually started working and in my latter or most recent employer that I really saw a difference in comparison to my former employer. So my experience right out of college. So I would say that ways that I've been made to feel different, being given one message by leadership to bring your true self to work. And so my true self is to be a little more relaxed and I can speak very professional. So I can do a lot of code switching. But then I also can shut it off and feel a little more relaxed and say, yeah, no doubt. I'll definitely get that done for you or whatever the case may be. So in that experience of working with a recruiter that has actually been at Yale University for about 10 years or so, she felt the need to continue to check me about things that I would say, for example, like, yeah, no doubt. And she'd say, yeah, we don't talk like that in this office. We're professional. And so I then start to realize that there is a white professionalism that's defined within a predominantly white culture. And that's when things really start to kind of spiral downhill for me, because I definitely start to feel way different, again, from my former experiences in high school and experiences in college, where I was either in the in crowd or I would say more superior than in crowd in terms of like leadership roles or what have you. Mm-hmm. So what I mean by it started to go downhill was I was then starting to feel more and more outcasted in my department, whether it was doing something well and not receiving recognition for it, and then seeing your white counterparts receive recognition for way less. I'm talking about things that are not even having to do with work, like cleaning the kitchen or cleaning the refrigerator in the office, versus actually like knocking out my metrics and doing well and getting, great reviews from hiring managers and clients, etc. So these are things that further and further, whether they were subliminal or whether, I apologize, whether they were passive or whether they were more overt, I started to feel more and more outcast. And it was disheartening to me. It definitely kind of took the wind out of my sails, someone who came from a former employer, very energized and willing to go, above and beyond. And I think that it was just one instance after another where I actually saw that my colleagues, my peers that were at the same level as me, brand new to the organization, they were being talked to differently. They were given more chances. It seemed like people were a little more short with me versus my counterpart. So I would say that it became more overt as I got older. And I'm not quite sure whether it was because I was more aware of it or whether it was just more present.
Mm. Is it different or the same, Kevin?
There's something different about this movement that I haven't seen. Again, going back to the Black is Beautiful movement. I mean, I love that time frame, that time period for us as Black folks. We were unified. We were embracing our Blackness. We weren't shying away from it. And it was a true movement. Like we were on the same page. And I haven't seen until recently, the recent events, I haven't seen a more consistent, organized movement like we're having now. I think we just got in a comfort zone, whether it was the 80s, 90s, and the early millennial. It's now a rallying cry. And it could be because of the orange guy. Did I say that right? The orange guy. But in every adverse situation, there is a strength to it, and so indirectly, I think he has unified us. He has, made us more aware of the situation. So I think it's different. The movement now is different. The situation for me as an older person is essentially the same, but the movement now does feel a little bit more different and a little bit more sustained. I mean, there will be little pockets every now and then. I can think of like OJ.
Right.
We kind of got together then, or Rodney King, but I see a more organized and sustained movement now than I think at any other time in probably decades.
Right. I mean, I think right now we are in the middle of history. And of course, I think we always are in the moment of history, but particularly as it relates to, as you call, like a movement, we hear often about the civil rights movement, and now we're hearing about the Black Lives Matter movement. And to me, those have been a very clear sort of identity of something happening where there's this collective purpose, this collective intent of doing something to create a different experience for Black people. And I think, of course, for the civil rights, it was about our rights to be able to do just like, the white America could do in terms of where they ate, how they would ride the bus and owning things and all of that, and having a right to, to vote. And all of those things were associated with just what their right was legally. And I think now the Black Lives Matter movement is very different from the civil rights movement because we can do some of those things, right? We can vote, we can go to a restaurant, we can ride the bus and sit wherever we want to. We can buy houses, we can do all those things. But now the Black Lives Matter movement, to me, it's really digging to another layer of what our rights are. Because now we're being harmed, we're being killed, doing those things that we now have a right to do. So whether we're going to the store, reading a book, or sitting in a dormitory in a college, now we're getting called on and saying we're threatening and we're in places that we shouldn't be. And we're now doing things that we actually fought to do. But now it's this whole nother layer that we can't do those things just because we're Black.
Right.
So it does feel different. It feels different to me because I think along with the media, I think I agree. I think the political climate really has really shed a spotlight on it. And for good or for bad, I do think it's giving us an opportunity to mobilize again, because I do think things have gotten quiet. I do.
Right. But I also feel that this actually started bubbling just below the surface when President Barack took office. We saw on a national level people that were standing on the Senate floor telling him, that he's a liar and to shut up and just being totally disrespectful and, really just disliking him because he was a Black man. And it was like, you have no right to be in this position. So I always felt that, this is not new to us. Those of us who have been around long enough, we know, when I hear people say, oh, I don't see color. Okay, that's a scapegoat. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to talk about race. Let's just be clear, for some people, not for me. But we saw that happening with just the total lack of respect. Calling his wife names. So we saw people, like you said, in places of power, showing who they really are. So are we surprised that number 45, who really it's about himself and getting glory for himself, are we surprised that he kind of eggs people along and actually makes them feel comfortable, just being blatantly racist and nasty and disgusting. I mean, all facets, not just about, race, but just people with disabilities, just it runs the gamut. So we have people that are just out here feeling like I can do okay. So.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly. I think Barack being elected president gave white folks a oh hell no movement, thought like, how did we let this happen? And I just feel, white folks are going to be white folks, and maybe that's a controversial statement. I don't expect anything like if I see a lion in my backyard, I expect them to attack me. It's just what I expect, and I just think that the movement sometimes is misguided. You can't go to the enemy for your remedy. And I just think that we have the resources ourselves to just, I think we have to start from within out more so than out in. And that's always the problem I've had, is that I don't think white folks are our biggest enemy right now. I think we're our biggest enemy right now. And I'm not looking to the white folks to do anything different than what they've been doing. But I think if we arm and equip ourselves with education, knowledge, resources, it won't matter what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think that point can be controversial at times, or at least a good debate, because I think we need both. I think that we absolutely, as a group of people, need to work on ourselves to come in agreement and to take action together. Because I think if we're not unified, then we're it's like hit or miss, I think, in certain targets that we have overall as a Black community. But I do think that those who, whether you the non-Black community, whatever you are, whether you're white, whether you're Asian, whoever, I do believe that you should join forces with us and recognize that there has been some challenges because of the system. And if you believe that, I welcome you. So I'm open to non-Blacks being supportive of us. But I do think there is certainly a really necessity for us as a Black community to make sure we have, we're dotting our I's and crossing those T's and unifying ourselves, which I think is also a little bit of a challenge for us. If we're totally honest, we have a lot of different perspectives at times. And I think we have sometimes the same goal, but the approach and the method, it varies. It was definitely the same in the civil rights movement, because there was a difference in approach from Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And I'm more of the Martin Luther King era, you know, and some of the people now, some of the younger people, you know, I heard someone say, you know, those are Malcolm X grandkids. You know, they got a different way of addressing this.
Right.
and I'm like, I'm Martin Luther King grandkid. So I'm a little bit more, you know, I have a different language. I have a different approach to it. And so I think it's a little bit of that still going on as well.
Right. And I think it's a recognizing that this is more than just what we see on the surface. This is systems that have been in place for hundreds of years that are so embedded in our fiber in America. I mean, we can look at books. There's a book called Caste. And it just talks about, you know, how people were placed in a level of society, whether they're the upper echelon or whether they were the bottom feeders, you know. So it's where we have that call to action. What are those things that we can truly get at, where we have political leaders, we have grassroots efforts to knock these systems down? Now, will we eradicate it? I don't know. They're so deeply embedded, but I believe that we have more people, like you said, of other races that, you know, they love getting along. They have a problem with people not being able to get along. So I'm also embracing that, you know, if there are people that want to get involved and they ask, you know, what can I do? You know, let's embrace them. You know, it doesn't mean that we have to exclude them because it's not their problem.
Yeah.
You know,
so
we do better together.
Yeah. So I'm curious what the psychological impact, how has this all affected you? Because I think I see it differently in different people that I talk to and come across, of how, you know, the tension right now is affecting us, whether it's something more intentional at work happening or just you are having more occurrences, whether you're interacting more with the police or just seeing things more on social media. But how has this affected you, Denver? How do you feel with all of this going on? How's it affected you? Are you losing sleep? Are you nervous? Or is there some anxiety? I'm curious to how it's affected you.
Yeah, I would say that it's been a progressive uphill, positively moving uphill battle for me. I think during COVID, I definitely felt sad. I had some very vivid dreams of, you know, having to carry a lot more often. I'm a gun owner. I've always collected guns. I've never really felt the need to go jogging and carry a gun in my backpack, but that's definitely something that I was doing after I witnessed Ahmaud Arbery be gunned down while he was like running and jogging. And kind of in comparison, I'm in Rocky Hill, Connecticut, so the back route that I take to go jogging or walking is actually along like a very woodland nearing a golf course. So it very much mirrors the same scene that Ahmaud Arbery was like shot and gunned down in. So that's definitely something that was like on my mind heavy. A few weeks after that, I actually was running up, doing sprints up a hill on a street with my girlfriend, and this white couple was coming towards us and said, I was very winded. I put my hands on top of my head to kind of get, more oxygen in my lungs. And this white couple had said to me, "Oh yeah, you don't have to put your hands up. We're not going to arrest you or anything." And so that was 2 weeks after. Yeah, that was 2 weeks after the Ahmaud Arbery incident. So this was just more and more on my mind. I felt sad. I felt depressed watching CNN, watching riots. Watching a special on all the folks that look like us that have been shot, gunned down, killed by police, etc. I thought my son was actually just watching his tablet as I had CNN on, but he popped his head up and he said, "Daddy, am I gonna get killed too?" And that's something that hit hard for me because I didn't think in me trying to just kind of get caught up on what was going on going to like impact him. But like that killed me. It makes me emotional to this day because of the fact of how, he's so innocent. I think about my experience growing up and not really witnessing, or not being aware of racism, and being blessed enough to be in that position. And I don't know what he's going to go through. I don't know the conversations I'm going to have with him besides like conversations that people have with me about dealing with cops. But I think along the way, I would say sometime in June or July, I just felt so empowered. I started to begin to feel more empowered because I was inspired to just take action. How can I make people around me more aware? Especially working at Yale University, I'm a part of Yale African American Affinity Group, and really just understanding that I work for a university whose sole tenets were set upon to make supremacy more elite, and further carry on through, the Ivy League college experience, further bolstering white supremacy in the form of like the caste system that Latricia referred to, further kind of giving those folks more access, and obviously less access to the folks that are more of the bottom feeders, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So the work that I do at the university now really just includes like panel discussions. I actually partnered with my son's mother because she's a therapist. I partnered with the university and brought her in to discuss mental health, having age-specific conversations with our children for the mental health aspect, repurposing our homes. So many of us are dealing with COVID and the social impacts of racism that is going on currently in our social climate. So as we've repurposed our homes and we are having the TV on while we are in our office, et cetera, just being exposed to all these things all at once, just really trying to make our homes again and not our office space, and learning how to cut off and have an appropriate work-life balance. So those are some of the things that I'm doing now as I feel more and more empowered. I actually just recently twisted my hair. And I'm really owning being Black in my environment. I'm no longer, cutting my hair short and rocking a high fade or rocking a Caesar to satisfy folks that don't look like me around me. And I'm really feeling proud, feeling more and more proud to be who I am, be intellectual. We're in a university where academia reigns supreme, and there's more folks that don't look like me. That are held at held at lower standards, while we are held at higher standards, being people of color. Yeah. So that's really where I'm at currently.
Okay. Kevin, how has this impacted you?
I really haven't done anything different. There's really not any point in time. I do watch a lot of news. I watch CNN and I watch Fox News. I kind of feel like it's imperative that I get both perspectives. But I feel more, because there's a lot going on with COVID, and the COVID in itself has obviously, for all of us, limited our freedoms somewhat. So I don't venture out as much as I once did, not because of anything racial. It's just I guess the bottom line is I'm more afraid of COVID than I am of white folks. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but it's old hat. It's nothing new. I mean, we've always, my neighborhood of friends that I grew up in, it was a mixed neighborhood as well. We always perceived the police as just another gang. I mean, gangs were pretty prevalent when we grew up in New Haven, and the police, the cops were just another gang. They weren't really your friends. They weren't like you see on TV where the policeman is your pal. We never perceived them that way. The one thing I do say is I can say is that there does seem to be an empowerment that I haven't seen in a while from supremacy groups. Denville, that comment that you heard running, that's shocking to me, that they are that empowered. I knew they were saying that behind our backs and under their breath, but to be that emboldened to be confronted with that is something relatively new to me. But no, it hasn't really changed, Scarlett, too much of what I'm doing differently.
So I'm curious though, how do you, watching those two different networks, does that stir up something? I can't do it. There, I get too agitated too quickly. And, if that's the case, then my home won't be at peace, because I'm going to be yelling and screaming when I hear certain things that I really know are just incorrect, as they say, false news, fake news. So how do you watch those two networks, and do you stay calm? It doesn't bother you? You just taking it all in?
Yeah, I mean, it again, I go back to the animal kingdom. It's like watching those safari shows. If you see a lion eating an antelope, it don't. That's what lions do, you
Okay.
know.
Yeah.
And if you watch that channel, that's what they're gonna do.
Yeah.
And so when I watch the news, even on both sides, they're gonna lie. They're gonna
But,
twist. I do enjoy how you can twist, how someone can twist the same commentary. That part of it fascinates me. Even on the liberals, the so-called liberal side. I mean, now we're up in arms because the president is going to name a new Supreme Court justice, which to me is just as important, if not more so, than the current election, because they're defining the laws, and the laws are now going to be on the conservative slant. But 4 years ago, the Democrats were on the opposite side of the fence. They were saying, no, 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 he's the president now. We should name it now. Barack should be able to appoint someone now. We should confirm them now. Well, now their tune has changed. So they've both switched. I mean, the Republicans are like, no, no, we should name him now. Whereas before they were like, well, we should wait. So, like I said, I watch it because there's a certain fascination that I have, and how someone can so adeptly not answer a question. And I think there's a skill in that. I use that in my professional career. If there's something that I'm uncomfortable answering, then there has to be a way. And I model myself in not being able to, perjure myself, or not, condemn myself by not answering a question. Well, let me say this about that. And you go off on a so other tangent. So I am fascinated by how you watch a show, and you think they got this person nailed. There's no way they can wiggle out. But guess what? They figure out how to wiggle themselves out. And there is an art to that. And there is a fascination, at least to me. Nobody else shares this fascination but me, but I find it unbelievable how you can be so adept at saying nothing for so
No,
long.
you're not by yourself. There's a lot of people. I mean, that's just the art of language, the art of conversation.
Oh,
My
man.
mother says that about me. She was like, "You got something for everything," and I was like, "Yeah, pretty much. I do try." There's certain levels you got to kind of stay on your P's and Q's, so you got that comeback.
Right.
So, but I think some of that too is just the political environment, has nothing to do with race. That's just the way that environment to me has always been. You say what you need to say, you stay to your points, you hone in on your message, you don't get distracted by the question. And if you don't want to answer the question, you say something else and stay on it. That's just, to me, politics.
But there's been no point in my life, even now, where, I mean, at any point in time prior to now, I always felt that any of these things that happened to our brothers and sisters out there could happen to me. It doesn't seem more keen now than before, than 10 years ago. I mean, if I got pulled over by the cops and say Orange, Connecticut, then at any point in time, I mean, I had, the worst butt whipping I've ever received in life has been by the police in Wallingford. And that was about probably 40 years ago. And I felt the same way then. I mean, when that siren goes, and your anxiety is elevated, and you're like, oh boy. And but no, I don't feel more in danger or less inclined to go different places now than before. To me, nothing truly has changed.
I will say I thought that there were some, and LA, I'm interested in your thoughts about this. I do think there was a period of time where I felt a little safe because I was a woman. Whether I was, I have the same kind of feeling when I see the siren. For me, it was like, oh gosh, I don't want to get a speeding ticket. My insurance gonna go up. but I didn't fear my life. Now it's different. I do fear for my life more so now. And I can't say that I always felt that way. I thought perhaps being a woman, it was less likely for me to be profiled. It was less likely for me to be pulled over for no reason. But now, yeah, I think totally different now. LA, do you think there are any differences? Or what have your impacts? I didn't ask you that question. So I'm curious about the impacts you've had, but also, this black male versus black woman experience. I think there are some differences, but certainly there are similarities.
Yeah, I think for myself, even before the Breonna Taylor incident happened, there were, quite a few women that we heard in the news, mysteriously died while in police custody. I just found it really interesting when the video came out with George Floyd. I often wondered, because we didn't see footage of what happened to Breonna Taylor, is that why it wasn't as gut wrenching to people? It didn't really punch them in the gut. And I'll be honest, I was actually kind of saddened by that, because I'm thinking, this is a Black woman, whose life was snuffed out. And I'm not saying that people didn't care and that they weren't outraged, but was it because we didn't see it? It wasn't in our face every day. Like every day we were seeing that scene with George Floyd. And I believe that was also done on purpose to almost be kind of get us desensitized to seeing violence against Black people. It really bugged me. And I actually literally called every news station that I could find and say, why are you continually showing this? Why are you showing it? We get it. We know what happened. We saw what happened. We can find that other places, So it frustrated me because I have nephews who are very big presence, and I worry about them. I do, because they're very, very much strong Black men who don't take any mess, and they're respectful. They were raised that way, but they're not scared. And so that part of me it made me nervous. As far as myself being fearful, I'm just honest. I'm not. I'm not. I don't look over my shoulder thinking, and maybe that's part of my toughness. I don't think I'm the best thing since sliced bread, but you come at me, you're gonna get what you're coming for. So I'm very aware of my surroundings and where I go and how I be. And so I think, like you said, with COVID, and then I'm also, helping my mom take care of my dad who has dementia. So there's just a lot of things layered on top of each other. So, just finding those outlets, and I'm also an optimist. I believe that things will get better. And I try to do what I can, with my own call to action to be able to empower and help. So, yeah, but I do see some nuances with men and women.
Do you believe things will get better, Kevin?
Wow, that's a loaded question. And I'm assuming you're asking that question, like, do I ever feel there's going to be a time where we're not going to be brutalized by the police? No.
Do you have any optimism? LA, kind of presented a little bit of optimism about just trying to be hopeful that things will get better. I'm just curious, if you feel that way.
I mean, there's always going to be that bad apple, that some rogue cops. You always hear that narrative saying that don't condemn the entire police community because of a few bad ones. I mean, there is some truth to that. I mean, I've had friends that were cops, Black and white. The problem I have is that more so than the rogue cops, because the rogue cops, it's always going to be hard to weed them out. But what I say to those guys that are what I perceive as good cops is, it's going to stop only when they start calling out their peers. They have that blue wall. They will forever convict Black people for having the phrase no snitch policy, but they invented it. I mean, the cops, they do not snitch on each other, and so until that dynamic changes, until they start calling out their own, and because in the George Floyd situation, you know that's a rogue cop, obviously, but what's equally disturbing to me is the others that just did not intercede on his behalf,
Right.
because that's a fellow blue gang member. And that's what I feel needs to change. Will it? No, I'm optimistic that it will. God, I hope so. I got two grandsons, man, and for them, I hope so. But you know, they have to conduct. I have to teach them to conduct themselves, not expecting it. I mean, and to be above it. And thank God I had my mother in my life who you're above all of that. So you asked the question earlier, am I more fearful now? No, I'm not more fearful. I would say my fear level is the same. I'm not fearless. It's the same. I still have certain fears in certain scenarios. But that's, I feel like we can use that to our advantage because Black people are accustomed to being the minority in certain situations. But take a white person, like I had a sprinkling of white folks at my wedding because I think I got a better price if I had like 6 white folks at my wedding. But
Yeah, okay.
but
Only you.
They didn't know that, but go ahead.
but you can sense their discomfort. Whereas Black folks, I mean, Carla, I mean, you're a classic example. I mean, you're extremely comfortable being the only. And that is something I think ultimately we can use to our advantage, being the only. We don't feel disadvantaged being the only in a scenario, but they do. And, answering that question of will it get better? I mean, I just think that white folks have a fear of us, which is why it's easier to shoot first and then try to figure it out later. There is a fear, and they probably shouldn't be cops. But I still maintain what I said earlier. The long-winded answer is that until the so-called good cops start putting their foot down and saying, "Yo, you're making us look bad."
Right.
So I'm hopeful that can.
Yeah, I want to build upon that, Kevin. I think that what I've learned in the latter part of my life, and I would say that for me, adulthood really came when I was like 25. I feel like 25 on until now, just because of the fact that I was, whether it's ignorance is bliss or just naive, etc. Just really focused on self, in your early 20s and in teens, etc. But I want to build upon what you said because of the fact that I do feel as though that fear manifests itself into so many things. That either fear and intimidation, either intellectual intimidation when you are the only one, and like I said, I am just now seeing being made to be felt different, in my environment. But previous to that, I was the only Black or only one of 2 Black people and Black males, especially in my college courses. And then after that, my graduate school, the only Black male in my graduate school, in the courses that I took, the only Black male that was excelling, in my predominantly white former employer. And then again, the only Black male in the recruiting office at Yale University. So I think that it always put me in a position of feeling like, wow, I'm really blessed. But then as I started to really understand what was going on around me, I said, wow, you're so intimidated of me. You're intimidated of the way that I speak. You're intimidated of the way that I articulate myself. You didn't know that I knew the thing, or how am I supposed to know the things that I know?
Right.
And it's not unless you are being extremely quiet, maybe sometimes putting yourself in an inferior position for fear of being outcasted or whatever the case may be, that you really start to understand that it's really them. It's really their ability to feel comfortable or not comfortable. And they openly will speak about it, or you'll feel it if they're not comfortable. So I just find that very, very interesting.
Yeah.
to answer your question, Carla, I think that I've seen this year, and it's actually a statistic that I look forward to actually knowing what the real number is at the close of the year. But I've seen more and more women of color get their permits, going for gun courses, sending in their applications, and then the result. I've seen more and more Black women in gun stores when I'm making my purchases for ammo or etc. So I don't know if that's a nuance. But I find it very, very interesting that I've been a gun owner for about 5 years now, and I am seeing influxes of groups of Black women taking courses together and getting their permits, etc. Do I feel optimistic that things will be better? I do hope that things are better, but I do know and see us living in our power, getting more access, and really in terms of what I was just speaking about, knowing their rights and knowing how to, or wanting to learn how to protect themselves just in case. Yeah. Because I think what we're all tired of is the feeling like we have to take out the insurance for what is happening and being kind of fully saturated in our lives now.
Yeah, I think big picture, I certainly am hopeful that things will get better. That's my belief system. I'm always a positive thinker, but I do understand the reality. I do understand in recognizing where you are in the times and being prepared to handle that, however that shapes and forms itself. But I would say that that if it's necessary, for us to kind of get additional resources, whether that is your permit or however, that's a necessary thing you've got to do. I think those statistics will be interesting because I think talking among my friends, it has definitely been a conversation that I hadn't had in the past. Mm. Well, I mean, we're talking about this more, about right. Just arming, should we arm ourselves and, getting comfortable with what a gun feels like for in case of, right?
Right.
And I've been that way. I said, I wanted to know what it felt like to hold one and to shoot one, because if I'm ever in an environment where one is on the floor through a hustle and a tussle, I wanted to know what to do with it. Right. I don't want to be that chick in the movie and you yelling at her, get the gun. I don't want to be that girl.
Right.
I want to be that girl that knows what to do and it's like it's ready to handle her business when it's necessary. Yes. But I would say as a Black woman, I would say the weight feels hard for me because not now. I've always thought about my husband, my friends, from the male perspective, right? But I'm also even more worried now because of everything that's happening. But I'm also now worried about all of my Black girlfriends as well. And I think to me, it's just been compounded, year after year after year, it just feels like there's just something else that I have to think about, something else I have to pray about, something else that I have to be concerned about. It doesn't feel like the burden has lifted. It feels like the burden has gotten heavier. I think the Black female, we carry a lot. We nurture, we hold you guys up as our Black men. We know what your worth and your value is. And it weighs on me when I see others dishonor that. And I think, being the only one, I think, Kevin, you brought it up first about, just my experiences being in a white environment all the time. I shouldn't say all the time, but 99.9% of the time, particularly in the work environment, in the neighborhoods and all of that, going to the store and all of that, it's very few of me that I see. And so I feel like you, Dimple, feel very blessed that I was taught how to manage and navigate through this system. I know how to code switch. My mother taught me how to do that very well. I have several voices. Depending on which line I'm picking up, depends on who you get.
Right. That's right.
But somehow, Carla, I feel a little less safe with you packing for some reason. I mean,
really?
I just want to throw that out there.
Throwing that out there.
You strapped right now does not get me the warm fuzzy.
That's okay, Carla. We'll go together. We'll go to the range together.
Okay.
Because Carla and I have had very intense conversations on a multitude of subjects, and I probably would not have engaged in any of them if I thought you were strapped.
It will be a surprise when I am. Trust me.
Man,
Right.
I don't. That's a surprise I don't need to have.
Right.
All right. So, in the interest of time, I just want to wrap up with, what do we do now? What do we do now? What do we do as a community? What do we do from the Black male perspective? What do Black women? What do we need to do? I'll start with you, LA.
Okay. Well, I'm empowered. I'm empowered. I believe we are seeing some grassroots efforts where people are really, forming alliances, using their political power, using, the fraternities, the sororities, people really stepping up to the plate and saying, what can I do? And not just for today. It's like, how can we make lasting change? So I think it really is about partnering with a lot of the organizations that are already out, finding out ways that you can get involved. Not everybody is a political head, but there are some community-based things. There's trainings, like Denville said. There are ways that we can help that may not get in the spotlight, but they can have an impact. So I think it's really about us, just finding our own niche, reaching out to others and finding out what they're doing and just be, partnering and supporting and just getting involved. We have to get involved some way, somehow.
Great. All right. Great. Thank you. Denville, what should we do now?
Yeah, I think, like Kevin said, he's seen more of a sustaining mobilization. So I think that's like what we need to continue to do is sustain the movement, sustain the sit-ins, not so much the dangerous rioting, but definitely making sure that we're protesting, getting out there for the things that we believe in. I think as Black men, Black women, I think a lot of things that I did was actually just like reflect. I did a lot of reflecting early on in April and May. Really started to learn more about my past, learn more about, I did ancestry DNA. I looked more into that. I looked more into just like the history of Black excellence. So not only focusing on the negative stuff, but looking at inventors, looking at really just the folks that in our past have kind of paved the way for us. And I think that's something that really empowers me to continue to do the good work that I'm doing in my professional arenas, but then also in looking back and reaching my hand for, my Black students, at the university.
Wonderful.
Making sure I'm giving examples of various diversity types of examples in the 2 classes that I teach at the university, not only sticking to the book and its curriculum, but also bringing a lot of what's going on in the social climate in the business world at the business school. So I think that's something that we all can do as the folks that are doing well, reaching back and, picking up the folks that are behind us.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Kevin, what should we do now?
Well, as a man of faith, first and foremost, pray. But when you pray and you get up off your knees, then what do you do? So for me, it's to be a walking, talking testimony that we define us, not the enemy. And so if I can impact any positive influence, Carla, on my nephews, your sons, my own biological nephews, my grandsons, I have nieces and nephews in college, just continue to encourage them that you define more so your lot in life. You are not defined by anybody else's opinions, thoughts of you. So don't believe that hype. I mean, I am a proponent strongly of self-empowerment. So I believe that we control our destiny, and it is not controlled by anyone other than ourselves.
Wonderful.
Excellent. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Thank you all. Yes. And I would add to that because you all spoke so well about some of the things that we can be doing now. I would also say, because we're in a critical moment now, preparing for the next national election, I encourage all of us in the Black community to get out and vote. We have been seeing a lot of traction. We've been seeing a lot of gathering of the Black communities, whether they're Black students or whether they're just, you know, your neighbors or your grandmas and all of those that are eligible to vote, getting them out there to the polls, and to not believe the hype, to not believe that, you know, there's a big lead and so now we don't need to go to vote, or, you know, there's a possibility of this. We have to shut out the noise and exercise our right to vote. And there's so many other things that you all mentioned, but I'll stick to this point right now as we get ready to close, that it is important. There are so many people who fought for our rights to vote. We need to exercise it. We need to make sure that not only are we participating in the national elections, but also in the local elections. And I wholeheartedly agree with all of you, is that we have to continue to build each other up. We have to let each other know that we have a purpose, we have an identity, and that we must hold our head up. We must understand our value and our worth and live being who we are. So I'm so happy all of you joined us. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been excellent. There's so much we could talk about. So I'm definitely going to have both of you guys back so that we can continue and talk about different things. Thank you so much for being a part of the Chair Chronicles. I love it.
My pleasure.
You see my chair?
Well, thank you so much, Denver. Good to see you. Carla, LA, very nice meeting you. I enjoyed it.
Meeting you.
Vote.
Go vote, go vote. So thank you all for tuning in, and we appreciate it. We want you to like, we want you to share this video. We want you to spread the word about the Chair Chronicles podcast as we continue to bring good content to you. So thanks again for joining us on the Chair Chronicles.
Chronicles. Yes.